In late June 2026, the United Kingdom underwent a comprehensive thermodynamic stress test. A powerful meteorological event enveloped the country, exposing the physical limits and vulnerabilities of the national built environment. This chart tracks historical UK peak temperatures over time. For decades, extreme summer heat was benchmarked by the anomalies of 1957, the 16-day heatwave of 1976, and the record-breaking spike of 2022. The 2026 data effectively breaks those long-standing baselines. The shift began in May when the century-old 1922 temperature record was broken, and then surpassed again a mere 24 hours later. By June 24th, Gosport registered 36.1 degrees Celsius, establishing a new upper limit for atmospheric energy over the British Isles. This was driven by a highly energetic meteorological boundary across Europe. A subtropical high-pressure ridge established a heat dome, trapping a saturated, sinking continental thermal plume directly over the UK. This event demonstrates that the UK's infrastructure must now function in an environment characterized by sustained, hyper-humid conditions rather than the temperate maritime climate it was originally engineered to withstand. The primary failure point of the heatwave occurred at the level of human biology, the body's inability to cool itself within this specific atmospheric profile. Human thermoregulation relies on the evaporation of sweat, a process governed by vapor pressure deficit, or VPD. This is the mathematical difference between the moisture currently in the air and the maximum amount the air can hold. This psychrometric chart maps the historic July 2022 heatwave against the June 2026 event. While 2022 reached 40.3 degrees, it featured exceptionally dry air and single-digit dew points. In 2026, the continental plume pushed regional dew points to 22 degrees. Because the air mass was nearly saturated, sweat pooled on the skin rather than evaporating. Without this cooling mechanism, the human body absorbed heat faster than it could dissipate it, pushing core temperatures toward lethal limits. This humidity altered the physiological impact of the heat. A measured ambient temperature of 35 degrees imparted the cardiovascular strain typically associated with 41 degrees. This biological stress immediately strained the public health infrastructure. 90% of hospital buildings in England lack centralized mechanical cooling systems. Many NHS facilities rely on architectural designs that lack cross-ventilation. Window safety mechanisms often prevent them from opening fully, trapping solar gain inside and turning wards into thermal traps. As indoor temperatures reached critical levels, hospital trusts activated emergency weather protocols. University Hospital Southampton issued advisories requesting that the public avoid emergency departments unless facing life-threatening crises. Some trusts instructed patients to limit the number of companions accompanying them to appointments. In spaces without mechanical cooling, every additional person acts as a 100-watt heat source, further raising the ambient temperature. The combination of hyper-humid air and unadapted healthcare architecture converted facilities intended for healing into zones of significant mortality risk. The crisis moved from the clinical to the macro scale as the National Energy System operator struggled to maintain the equilibrium between electricity supply and demand. Demand spiked as households and businesses simultaneously activated cooling and refrigeration systems, creating an immediate, unseasonal shock to the network. While demand rose, the extreme heat simultaneously degraded the physical capacity of the national power network to generate electricity. This degradation was particularly evident in the renewable sector, where commercial solar arrays began losing efficiency under direct thermal loading. This chart tracks semiconductor thermal degradation. For every degree Celsius that a panel's temperature rises above 25 degrees, generation efficiency drops by up to 0.5%. With surface temperatures exceeding 40 degrees, renewable output was substantially curtailed. The meteorological blocking pattern of the heat dome also resulted in exceptionally low wind speeds across the continent, rendering the UK's wind turbine fleet largely inert during the peak of the crisis. The thermal load even affected traditional baseload generation, specifically the UK's fleet of gas-fired power stations. Warm air is physically less dense than cold air. As a result, the volume of air drawn into gas turbines contained significantly fewer oxygen molecules per cubic meter. Plant compressors had to expend more internal energy to maintain the necessary atmospheric pressure and air-to-fuel ratios, which depressed the net megawatt output precisely when peak power was required. To maintain the grid, the operator paid a premium of £1,400 per megawatt-hour, nearly 20 times the average price, to import electricity via continental interconnectors. Relying on reactive mechanical cooling creates a technical paradox. It increases demand on a power grid that is being physically throttled by the same thermal conditions. Beyond the electrical grid, the heat affected the physical bedrock of national logistics, the rail network. The UK's rail system relies on continuous welded rail. While durable, this steel infrastructure is acutely sensitive to solar radiation. Steel rails absorb and retain radiation. In direct sunlight, the temperature of the metal can rise 20 degrees Celsius higher than the ambient air temperature. When tracks exceed their stress-free installation temperature, the metal attempts to expand. Because the rails are fixed, this generates immense internal compressive forces. These forces can lead to the violent buckling of the track, creating sun kinks that pose a significant derailment hazard. Network Rail was forced to impose severe speed restrictions to limit the kinetic strain on the weakened tracks. These safety protocols caused hundreds of cancellations and paralyzed regional mobility. The heat wave also tested hydrological systems that were already strained by a dry spring. Domestic water consumption spiked to extraordinary levels. Thames Water recorded the injection of an additional 387 million liters of water into its network in a single day. This surge reflected the public's attempt to use water for physiological cooling, leading utility providers to declare red alerts and ban the use of hosepipes and sprinklers. From rail metallurgy to water main capacity, national engineering networks reached their mathematical limits under the unmitigated thermal load. The current economic response to extreme heat relies on localized consumer solutions. When national infrastructure fails to provide cooling, citizens are forced to purchase fans and air conditioning units to maintain thermal safety. The Climate Change Committee argues that this reactive model is unsustainable and has issued mandates for formalized structural adaptation. By 2040, all UK care homes must be equipped with the infrastructure necessary to maintain indoor temperatures between 16 and 26 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, new national infrastructure must be structurally modeled to withstand global temperature rises up to 4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Advocacy groups are also calling for immediate legislative changes, including a statutory maximum workplace temperature to protect the labor force during extreme heat alerts. This transition includes the development of municipal cool hubs, designating air-conditioned public buildings as thermal refuges for vulnerable residents during peak heating. The June 2026 heatwave confirmed that the UK's climate has shifted toward a new baseline of subtropical extremes. In this environment, structural hardening of infrastructure is the primary requirement for maintaining the nation's socio-economic stability.